Welcome to Connected Intelligence, a podcast about all the things we bring to work that aren't actually about the work. Join us in conversation about the building blocks that bring complex ideas to life, not the code, calculations, or research, but the bonds between teammates, the connection to your purpose, and the character that you build along the way. Welcome back, listeners. I'm your host, Sonia Senek. Today is an incredible day. We welcome back to the podcast Maja Djikic, an associate professor and the director of the Self-Development Lab at the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. Maja is a psychologist specializing in the field of personality development. Her work focuses on how the self changes and means of developing a congruent and flexible self. Her work also examines the impact of self-change on relationships. Maja has published more than 30 articles and book chapters in the area of personality development in journals such as Psychological Science, Journal of Research in Personality, Creativity Research Journal, New Ideas Psychology, and more. Her research has been featured in the New York Times, Salon, Slate, The Scientific American Mind, and many other media outlets. Maja's first book, The Possible Self, A Leader's Guide to Personal Development, will be released on March the 5th. Today we get a chance to dig into all of it. How the self develops, the difference between personality and temperament, what are some red flags of stagnation, and Maja's theory on the wheel of self. Please enjoy Professor Maja Djikic. Maja, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to host you again on the podcast.
My pleasure.
So you share that you have spent 7 years thinking about The Possible Self, your new book. What was the original inspiration for the book?
I think the original inspiration was hearing over and over again my adult successful students feeling like something is missing, feeling stagnant, and their response, mental response to it being, oh, well, that's just how it is, or that's how I am. I think when I hear those words, that's just how I am, or that's just how life is, you're supposed to grow in your work and then become stagnant and then think about retirement. That really made me think hard about what are we getting wrong about development.
You write that this book's written not just to inform, but to help transform. Why do people need help transforming?
I think most people who have tried changing some part of their life that they found difficult to change have the experience of, I tried, I failed, I tried, I failed, and then what's the point? And so what has happened over the last 25 years, maybe even more, is that we have a neuroscience of transformation, such that we understand that the brain is plastic, that things can change, is that just we needed to kind of pull from different parts of psychology to find what techniques are best suited for transformation. So I think I could. There's part of me that wanted to write a book that just informs, because that's the kind of scientist in me that says, okay, I just want to fill it with studies and experiments that have been done. And the beautiful thing about my publishers is they were kindly encouraging that it be something that everybody can use. And so I found, as I moved from just all science to putting the science in, but in a way that's understandable and digestible to people, that adding the techniques to change would make the book allow people to be self-sufficient in their growth and transformation, when most of the time we feel very dependent on other people. This is not to say that at the same time we can't use the help of coaches and therapists and all the people, all the practitioners. It's wonderful to have that support. It's just that that we can also do it alone. It informs us with the process. It makes it less scary. It makes it a bit more straightforward.
You mentioned that, the development process is natural in life. So flowers do it naturally. And when we get to adulthood, there can be some stuckness that occurs. Why does the development process sometimes stop?
It's a big question. On one hand, you would think it's a very unnatural thing for development to stop, given that we have evolved to grow and to develop. So the reason for it is that, unfortunately, we have in nature, if you, let's say, eat red berries that are very poisonous, um, we have evolved that we remember very, very vividly that we should not, after that, ever eat any red berries, no matter what the circumstances. So nature kind of has made things that seem sort of difficult or scary or dangerous to us, made it something we really, really want to avoid. And I think what happens to us in life is that we go through experiences that, shall we say, bake in a particular construct we have about the world, whether or not it's like, well, I'm not good enough or whatever that is, and it stays baked in kind of neurologically until adulthood. And we need to give it a little special push for those constructs to reopen and for us to be able to grow in the same way. So I think we get stuck because of this. Think of it as sort of evolutionary conservatism of trying to keep us protected. People don't just, it does the job really well. People stay protected. They just stop growing.
When we met last, you took me through a very common or popular model, which is the plaster model of personalities in the
Yes.
90s. And people's propensity to say, I'm really like this, or my horoscope says that, I'm a Virgo,
Yes.
so I must be like this. But
Yes.
you believe in your book, The Possible Self, that people can change, they can adapt, they can grow. What in your career of decades of working in this space has really made you believe that that's true?
Oh my God. All these wonderful adults that I work with every day who ended up making a transformative move in their personal and professional lives fundamentally, seeing it over and over again. And I think, most people have both experiences. They have the experience of, oh yes, I've been trying and I'm stuck. But they see around them all these people who are growing and changing and exploring. And so the part of the mind is, well, maybe I could do that. So I think my experience of watching people grow, even when it's very difficult, it's kind of hard not to believe your own eyes. And in my mind, if it's possible for one person,
Mhm.
it opens the possibility, right? Option. And that means that we just need to find the right ingredients. What is the recipe of transformation that helps people move and kind of restart their development?
That sentence, if it's possible for one person, many ears would hear that sentence differently. Some would say, an optimist would say, it's possible for one person, so it's definitely possible for me. Maybe a pessimist might say, it's possible for one person, but that's because they have all these, these reasons and these things around them where it's possible for them. So can you take us through the difference between personality and temperament as
Yes.
they play together?
Yes, I think it's very interesting that personality is what people tend to think of when they say things like, I'm just shy and I don't like to be around others," or "I am assertive," or "I am extrovert," or "I'm introvert." And when people talk about personality, they think of it as if it were genetic, right? Like somehow genetically they were meant to be shy, and now they're going to be shy for the rest of their lives. What is genetic turns out not to be personality, but temperament, which is
Mhm.
physiological differences between us. So maybe, you were born with, you know, better lungs, and I was born with poor digestion. And then because of that, we developed ways to interact with our environment to get to or achieve our aims. And we do it so I think of personality as early skill in dealing with your temperament in a particular environment. And if you think of personality like that, if you think, well, I'm an extrovert, which means that given my physiology, I've learned to be with others. What is the other skill that I have yet to learn? I have to yet to learn how to be by myself and really enjoy it. So if you think of yourself, well, I'm an extrovert, I have excellent skill of extroversion. Our development is always on the opposite pole of that personality trait. It's like, what is the other pole? And and there's that space where we can develop. I think a lot of people would understand this intuitively. If I asked them, do you enjoy being with others? They would say, yes, I do. I like in these circumstances enjoy being with others. And then I say, do you also enjoy being by yourself? They say, now when you said it, I do that as well. And so this split between extrovert and introvert is less meaningful. If we think of it as early skills, then we can say, I'm very good at these sets of skills that I learned early on or that I was encouraged to learn by my environment, my parents, my family. But then yet there is this other set that I've never gotten to, and there's nothing really genetic that prevents me from doing it. There's actually space for that growth. And that growth might provide more fulfillment than I've ever felt in years. That, I think, if we think of personality's early scale, it suddenly opens up a whole range of possibilities for us as adults.
Hearing that there's something on the opposite pole that you may need to learn and being quite comfortable where you are,
hmm
what do you see as the biggest barrier for folks to develop into those new spaces?
I love that question. You could say, well, I'm an extrovert. I love being an extrovert. Why would I ever want to develop a skill of wanting to be by myself? And so that's a very interesting question. Actually, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to grow or develop for that matter at all. We can just stay comfortably where we are at. Um, but what I would argue, if somebody asked that to me, I would say, well, it's interesting. Just because you know the skill doesn't mean that you need to do a lot of it. But it would be nice to know what is it that one gains from it? What are inner and outer things that you can gain from understanding how to be alone in a way that is centered and grounded and refreshing and restorative. And then you can choose not to exercise it. It's
Mhm.
like you have this skill. It's like you can have a skill of driving stick shift and then choose to buy automatic car. The point is that you know both, and in that off chance when you're stuck in a small town in Spain and they only have stick shift to rent, guess what? It might come handy.
Much of the conversation today in the world about self-development focuses heavily on behaviors.
Yeah.
And why do you think this is? And can you share a little more about why only focusing on behaviors is a problem?
On one level, it makes sense people focus on behaviors because behaviors are what we see in another, right? So we can interact with their emotions, we can interact with their thoughts, we can interact with their motivations, but usually through the medium of behaviors, which are words and actions. And so, given that these two are the most um, visible, shall I say measurable? People love measurable, actionable, measurable. Deliverable. It's wonderful. So it makes sense then to say, okay, it's the most important. The problem with thinking of behaviors, it's very important, but the problem with thinking of it as the most important is that the other parts of the self, the four parts, which are your emotions, your thoughts, your motivations, and your old neural pathways that you carry in your body, are impacting behavior all the time. Which means that if you have this self that has these five parts, right, and you're just pulling emotion um, one way, whereas you're pulling the rest of the self the other way, right? The rest of the self is pulling the other way. We get to what is self-fragmentation. Most people's attempts to change behavior feel like breaking oneself. It's like I'm trying to eat that chicken and kale every day for lunch, and my God, is it just painful every day? And when will come the day when it feels natural? Um, it's a difficult, it's a painful self-fragmenting process rather than thinking about how do we move all parts of the self in the same direction so that it feels natural.
In this, you refer to it in your book as the wheel of self,
Yes.
and that all of the pieces moving together forward is just the goal.
Yes.
When you talked about self-fragmentation, there's also a concept of stagnation. Maybe you
Yes.
start feeling that breaking, and so you just want to stop.
Stop.
What are some red flags for stagnation?
When you don't look forward to getting up in the morning, all right, where you can predict your days and weeks with absolute certainty for many, many days and weeks to come, right? When you don't look forward to something unexpected happening, or when you don't feel joy of in yourself, in others. Um, Basically, when we feel joy when we grow. So when you stop growing, you're going to feel it's kind of even if everything is going well, it just doesn't feel alive quite
Mhm.
fully. So there are subjective things, and I think the enemy of taking the red flag seriously is believing that that's what adulthood is supposed to be like. This is what adulthood is a series of weeks and months, and you look forward to your weekends and your vacations, and but really in meantime you just cross them off, right? Like we're in a prison, you just cross off one day one day, and that is a problem. Those are red flags.
you refer to one of the elements or one of the flags being behind schedule,
Oh,
feeling
yes.
like, oh, I'm behind on everything. And can you share more about how that shows
Yes.
up in people's lives?
So, very frequently we mentally measure ourselves on our success or beauty or health or whatever it is with others in a way that completely disregards the uniqueness of each person. And what that looks like is, and I think is that very primate, I call it, I call it sort of the monkey mind of like, okay, we're all here. And so how do we all categorize and put ourselves into a hierarchy of who is better and worse? And so what that leads to, so if I believe that basically I'm exactly like everybody else, then I'm going to try to measure myself against everybody else to see if I'm doing well or not.
Hmm.
And what that means is that you keep looking up LinkedIn to check whether or not this person who is, went to similar school and is similar age got to this job, or, how many achievements or how many awards or how much money they're making. Um, are there, are their spouses better looking than yours? You're just keep trying to compare everything
Yeah.
to how you're doing, and this kind of feeling of I'm not there yet. It
Hmm.
somehow it indicates something, but not what people think it does. It doesn't actually mean that you're not caught up with whatever it is that you thought. It just means that right now what you're living is not fulfilling you. People who are growing, they don't look around to see is somebody else growing faster. They just feel the joy and they have their direction. And so they don't just keep turning around to say, oh, well, what's your direction? What's your direction? That kind of looking around is a sign usually that we're not doing well. We haven't found our way, and therefore we keep looking at other people's lives as if they could provide us the answer, which unfortunately they can't.
One of the other red flags you mentioned is advice that never
Oh
works.
yeah.
So over time, I think people can develop their own personal board of directors, an external set of folks. Maybe they're your friends, your family. You check in on any decisions you're making as you're going through. And, what do you think? What does this person think? And you're weighing out your decisions with lots of input. And connection and relationships are great. But when it comes to specifically people giving advice or you being the receiver or giver of advice that never works, why is that a problem and why is that a red flag for stagnation?
So I find it fascinating how much sometimes, if we are not doing well, I mean, obviously we want advice. We seek out advice, we read books. And the problem often is that the people who are giving us advice are really good at the thing that we're really bad at.
Mm.
You see? So they give us the advice of somebody who is already very good at it. And to them, it makes sense. It's very logical. Here's the three things that you do. For example, let's say that you're financially not doing well, and although somebody else who has the same salary and same financial situation, they simply know what to do with their money. So they're in the black and you're always in the red. And so you would think, okay, well, if I ask them, they're going to give me a set of, a series of advice that will help me get to the same place they are. But they can't because their advice falls onto our mind.
Mhm.
And our mind is full of misconceptions and experiences. By the time it filters through to what we do, it's a whole different ballgame. So, you know, and I'm sure you have tried to give advice before to people and it just, doesn't go anywhere, right? If we're struggling with something for a long period of time, it is not just a question of, oh, knowing what to do. It is it, what to do is filtered against the inner life. This inner life needs to be transformed to be ready for this advice. And when that time comes, there will be no problem. You're going to be able to pull off whatever you're trying to pull off.
So, what do you think it is that people are looking for when they're seeking advice from others?
I mean, naturally, they're seeking solutions. They won't change,
Hmm.
but they think that the change is located in other people. It's interesting because, societal change is often located in changing structures to make society different. But when there's an inner block to change, the answer is not on the outside. It's always on the inside.
But isn't also societal change a product of many people who are making decisions in society internally changing?
Yes. And it's very interesting. I always, when we're trying to make societal change, um, trying to make it from a place just of kind of unprocessed emotion or being wounded in a way that we're still struggling with ourselves, we can try, but we might kind of destroy ourselves in the process. Whereas, uh, I think it's also preferences. People who study outside societal change, they focus on different things. I'm a psychologist. I focus obviously on inner change. In my mind, you change your inner life and you basically start acting because you've changed all parts of the self, even your actions and the ways of being are going to interact. And I always, people think I sound funny when I say, when you produce inner transformation or inner change, the world transforms itself around you. It's like pieces falling into place uh, in a different way. And why? Because you suddenly don't respond to things in the same way. You make decisions differently. You feel differently. You react differently. Um, everything about you becomes different, and that transforms your close environment, your societal structures in which you participate.
That sounds like an amazing place to be, but it's maybe a difficult bridge to cross. So what are some of the barriers when people are thinking about transforming inward and looking inward as opposed to looking outward for that type of transformation? What are some of the barriers that they have to overcome?
So one barrier is just simply believing this is who I am, going back to our start of the story, or this is genetic. So that's one barrier. Another barrier is we're oriented towards behavior. So it's to think that I just have to do something differently and keep doing it, and somehow my inner life is going to change as a consequence of all the doing. Then there's the fact that your transformation is going to affect relationships and disrupt them. Why? Because when people enter relationships, they enter with the person who you are at the time. I call it kind of a little deal. It's like you're in your little box. Let's say you're the extrovert box, and I'm in my box, and now I have chosen to have a friendship or relationship or professional relationship with you because of the box that I liked. If you start coming out of your box and start to develop, well, suddenly, wait a minute, that wasn't the deal. The deal was you're supposed to be in your box and I was supposed to be in mine. So, what it really requires is a lot of conversation, a lot of communication to help people around us understand, yes, I understand this is who I was before, and I'm growing. So now you're actually in a relationship with a different person. How do you feel about that? Are you okay with adjusting to it? Are you, how do we do this together if possible? And that, if possible, that's the scary bit.
Because it may not be.
Because it may not be. People may choose, you know what? I liked you when you were an introvert, and now suddenly you want to go out and enjoy social things so much, and simply that's not the life that I wanted, and, good luck.
That tendency to compare, you mentioned another red flag on stagnation is envy.
Oh, yes. Well, envy is, it's a red flag, but like a good red flag.
Say more.
I love envy, really. It is such a visceral experience, right? And it's such a quick realization, this is what I want. Given that a lot of people don't even can't find it difficult to locate part of themselves that are underdeveloped, being able to locate it so quickly by saying, oh, yes, I envy that. Oh, I want that. Well, that's wonderful to know, isn't it? As long as you don't mistake that you want that versus whatever it is that you want for yourself, right? It's, if you envy, I don't know, somebody has a nice group of friends, as long as you don't try to get their friends, you try to get your own friends with whom you're as close to. Um, it's a wonderful little signal cue. This is what I want in my life. I need to overcome inner barriers that prevent me from having that.
People may experience envy and instead have quite a frustrated reaction. instead of feeling like, oh, this is great information of something I'm passionate about or that I'd like in my life. Why do you think that frustration comes up, and how can people work through that?
I think it's part of a broader problem of us thinking that negative emotions are our enemies and we're supposed to fight them off or it's a bad thing for us, when really uh, uh, our emotional system is a signaling mechanisms that helps us navigate the world. So when emotions come up, it's because it's trying to tell us something that we need, where we need to adjust. And so I think that the frustration of, and people experience this, they feel negative emotion somehow tells them something bad about themselves and their situation that they can't change. I think the difference is, what is the set of beliefs about whether or not you can have this thing that you want? If you think you can't have it, that other people are simply lucky, that your situation would never allow it, well, then it's going to be very depressing, right? But if you understand that things are possible for you, that it won't quite look like it looks like for somebody else, and that's a good thing. Why? Because you're a completely different person. So in the example I had before, let's say that you envy other people who have, let's say, a nice close circle of friends, and you feel like you don't have that. Um, so it's a good thing that you're going to have your own circle, because you're going to have the friends that you need rather than friends that, just sort of, that it seems to you are the right group of friends. So that individuality, getting what you want and need, that's more important than it looking a particular way. But knowing that you can get there, I think makes a difference. If you think you can't, then there's going to be a lot of pain and frustration.
Is it that the intensity of your emotional response or emotional signal to something, the more intense it is, the more we should pay attention to it?
Oh, yes. I think of it as kind of ratcheting up. It's a little bit like, also think of it like having a physical wound, and your physical pain is a signal to you should attend to the wound. So if you just leave it and it festers, well, it's just going to start hurting more and more until you start paying attention to it. So if you don't want to be, um, be experiencing a lot of negative emotion all the time, start paying attention when it just shows up, even in minor uh, minor versions of it. And something else, the background of negative emotion that people experience often indicates ways of inner blocks and being
Mhm.
that should be worked on. But again, we just think, well, I'm just a sad kind of person, or I'm just the person who, um, feels unmotivated, or I'm just the person who is always bored when I have 2 minutes of free time. It's emotions are signals. They're like a traffic light. They don't just show up for no reason.
Mhm. How much do you think the pace of, social media, the news cycle, our ability to be connected and nudged through text messages or email, does that give folks enough time to really look inward and start to pay attention to these signals? You talk in your book about the tendency to overdo.
Yes.
Can you speak a bit about that?
Yeah. So I think when something is not going well, obviously, because it depends obviously on person, but in North America, there's a lot of like the doing culture. Let's just do it. So I
Mhm.
don't know. Let's say that you want, um, you're applying for a job. Well, you're going to apply for 600 jobs, or you're going to apply for 300 jobs, and you're going to just like, or if you are trying to find a partner, well, you're going to sign up for 6 different apps, and you're now going to go on dates twice, twice each evening. It's not understanding, um, not, we overdo because the doing doesn't seem to work. And when it
Mhm.
doesn't work, we seem to think, oh, well, if we just do more of what's not working, well, that must, that must do the trick. So, if doing is the only thing you have at your disposal, well, what are you going to do? You're going to either do less or more, which is exactly what happens to people. They either overdo or they fall into kind of a paralysis where they do nothing.
Mhm.
And the answer is, there is more than just doing and overdoing. When it comes to media, it's very interesting. On one level, it's a little ironic. You have this same little, piece of technology, which is the phone, and on it you have connections to your family. You do call and FaceTime or do other, you know, you have connections to your work, and then you have a whole other kind of life that is engagement in ways of being with each other that we haven't experienced quite a lot, where these apps are designed to keep us glued. I mean, literally, and I think they're pretty open about it, how these apps are designed to keep us addicted and distracted.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think it's kind of very hard to have on one piece of technology the combination of the two. So it's like you have your both tendency to distract and your addictions, and then right next to it, human connection to
Mhm.
other, like when you're texting your friends or you're arranging time to meet. And so that becomes kind of a dangerous little piece of technology, right? Um,
What does it have the potential to fragment or pull at in an individual?
so here's the thing. When you have part of yourself that is not fulfilled, you try to seek for its fulfillment. You will either do it in your life by trying to make conditions for it to happen, and you'll even be drawn to just watch it. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, again, I'll go with the example of not having friends. Okay, so you want more friends, you want more social connection. Now, do you ever wonder why is it that in North America we love to watch shows about groups of people living together,
Friends.
like Friends, right? A bunch of other, like think about all the other, like things like Seinfeld, where you have they're not even friends, they're not living together, but every day they're in each other's house.
Mhm.
So why do we love watching that? We love watching it because we have a deep core desire to have really close social bonds. But because it's like you come from work, it's kind of 6 or 7 already PM, and then you're really tired and you don't want to get out of the house. I mean, we're in Canada, it's kind of cold. So you turn on TV, and instead of having friends, you watch them.
Mm. One
Mm.
of the other red flags for stagnation
Yeah.
you mention is being immature. And you write
Yes.
about how it's very difficult to do self-inquiry around your own maturity level.
Yes.
Why do you feel that in this same place where there's that immaturity, there's also the potential for massive fulfillment?
Because those are the parts of the selves that we left behind in growth a long time ago. And and then having that part of the self grows, it has so much more potential to give you a sense of fulfillment. It's something that has been unfulfilled for a very, very long time. It's a little bit like being hungry for a very, very long time and finally having a bite to eat, right? It can be extraordinarily powerful to finally fulfill parts of the self that have been long left unfulfilled.
Webster's dictionary defines desire as to long for or to hope for.
Mm-hmm.
And in your book, you mentioned that a want may get very intense and turn into a desire, which is a chronically unfulfilled goal. What effect does a desire or a chronically unfulfilled goal have on the self?
Yeah. So desire as a chronically unfulfilled, I don't quite use the term goal as much as a want.
Got it.
Because goal can be anything, really. I can
Mhm.
set a goal to become accountant. Now, is it connected to my wants or not? Not really, but anything goes with goals. Wants are different. They're mine, and I can have wants that are not, it's a complex topic. I think what it does, it colors your life in a shade of gray because people think that if I don't have this thing that I really, really desire, what's the point of everything else? And unfortunately, it something that has been long left undeveloped has that effect. For example, it could be that you that you have long unfulfilled yearning to have a romantic partner. Now, you could be very successful professionally. You could have great health, great friends, great creativity, and yet this fact of this really, really unfulfilled part of yourself is going to kind of cast a shade
Mhm.
over the rest of your life. And the same thing, you could now, the other way around, you could have wonderful partner, wonderful friends, again, great health, great creativity. But let's say that professionally you feel unfulfilled. Well, somehow the mind goes to the places that are unfulfilled. And so the fact that and of course we can practice gratitude and remind ourselves that this is there and that we need to enjoy it. But if you have something that is deeply, deeply unfulfilled, it's really difficult to get our minds off it and to even be able to enjoy the parts of our lives that for which we do have gratitude.
And what are some tools to get our minds off of it?
Inner change, inner transformation. Mind is controlled by, again, other parts of the self.
Mhm.
So this whole system, if the mind continually keeps getting messages from the unconscious that say, pay attention to this, pay attention to this, well, maybe we should, but not in the way of, well, let me overdo or let me do
Mhm.
or let me not do, but in a way of, okay, can I look at the whole self and see what got stuck when, and how can I get it to move again?
When you talk about all the pieces of the self moving together
Mm.
seamlessly, like the wheel of self coming together and starting to turn again, what are some signals that that's starting to happen for someone? How do you know?
Oh, you'll know. You'll know like this. Um, Motivationally, you're going to be very engaged. So you're going to have interest. You'll have interest in waking up in the morning. I always talk about, remember sometimes when you're a kid and your parents or your caregivers promise you something exciting in the morning. In the morning, they'll take you, I don't know, to circus or to the zoo or, um,
Ba-
some exciting
baseball game.
baseball game that you love, right? And you're up at 4 thinking, oh my God, it's happening, it's happening, it's happening. Okay, where is that excitement? So the first signal that you're gonna have when you know the wheel is moving well is you start getting this really strong excitement about your waking up in the morning. You don't have to be dragged out. You're like, oh wow, I get to get up. Um, the mind will be curious and explorative of the world, and it will be able to engage with more just than oneself. So when the wheel is moving well, it frees the mind to
Mhm.
actually observe others, create relationships to others. So it stops being inwardly oriented. It becomes more in the world. Your emotions, you start having a lot of joy and other positive emotions. Um, and you are less drained and you feel energized even when you're physically tired. So
Mm.
this is one sign. This is a set of cues that the wheel of self is moving well. I mean, think about the last time you picked up a really exciting hobby or recreation. It's that all parts of it were like everything about it was exciting, and even just limitations of the sleep. You don't care about anything. It's a little bit like being in love, right?
Mhm.
Um, so when the wheel is moving well, it's like being in love with that part of your life.
It's interesting that you say when you know the wheel is moving and turning, you're paying attention, your mind's able to see things and be curious outside of yourself. That interchange is happening. And when your mind is actually focused inward and you're focused on that negative thing, on that desire or an unfilled need, when you're looking inward, you're actually not growing.
Yes, except that in order to grow, we need to really that. So, part of what I find it so difficult about convincing people is just not to look at their strengths only.
Hmm.
It's to say, okay, there's this, instead of it being chronically attention drawn inward, can we now dedicate ourselves for next couple of weeks of just dedicating attention and do the inner work? And for that, you need to really look inward. But it's for a limited amount of time, and it's not just observing your own misery, and it's you're doing the work,
Hmm.
right? So it's a little bit, again, I have the same thing as physical wound, right? In order, if you want the wound to go away, it's gonna either keep hurting in the background, but what I want you to is really go in, like open it up, whatever you do
Clean
with the
it.
wound, clean it, and then, you know,
I feel like neither of us are qualified to know what to do with the
yes,
wound.
yes, I know, you stitch it up, and then, but you see, you need to do something about it. So you need to not just have this inward vague perception of suffering and pain. You need to be informed, and in an informed way address the thing that is, and that requires moving the attention inward so that it can finally be released outward.
So, one of my favorite quotes from your book is you say, true self development is tiring, is
Mhm.
painful, requires courage, and is possibly the last thing you may want to do when feeling fragmented and pained. Yet it is also a way to fulfill your desires and get to feel the beauty of being whole. No one can do it for you. Only you can find an invisible thread of your potential that will keep pulling you forward. That invisible thread, Maja, in your life, when have there been those moments where you have found it and how?
Oh my God. So many invisible threads. I often think that the reason why I wrote a book, and the reason why I kind of feel qualified to have written a book in addition to the PhD in psychology and all of these other things.
Oh, just those things.
No,
Yeah.
but really the true qualification is to have been unfulfilled in so many different parts of my life. So I feel like, I've been stuck in practically everything, right? Um, and to be able to suddenly catch that thread. So, you know, um, socially, in terms of friendships, in terms of professionally, in terms of creativity, um, in terms of health, like there's all these ways in which I think I have experienced stuckness, and that through inner work, and that's the magical part, that you're able to catch it, and then when you have it, you think, well, how is that even possible? I think the first instances of that made me feel like, how is it even possible for the outside life to change so drastically as a consequence of the inner work? Um, so, I would be really unfit to write this book if things were going well in my life. And so I find the fact that I have been so stuck in so many parts of my life like a wonderful preparation to write the book, because I always tell people, if it worked for me, God knows it can work for you. I'll give you one example, and then
Nice.
right. So I used to be a terrible teacher. Like, I mean, really terrible. I remember, I don't know whether I should say this or not. You can edit it out. But the very first time I had to teach, I was in the second year of my PhD. I was so stressed out. First, I would break out in hives. I had blisters on me because it was so stressful to get in front of people. And then on top of it, I remember the very first class I had to teach. I had to teach this large group of 230 students of personality psychology. I took a shot of tequila. I thought, I can't get in front of these people. I can't get in front of them. Just get me some, I don't know what to do with myself. I found the whole experience painful, unpleasant, tormenting,
Mhm.
right? But, I was a broke PhD student. What you're going to do, you're going to do what you need to eat. To be able to get to the place inside of myself where I can go in front of people and can have joy in being with them, in teaching them, in learning from them, um, I would have thought impossible.
Mhm.
I would have, I had the same kind of narrative that most people had, which is, that's just who I am. I'm just a very, very intense introvert. I should just be in the lab, stuck doing my research. And that, just to watch that, sometimes people don't even believe me when I tell them. They say, "Oh, you exaggerate." And I think in my mind, "Oh no, I don't." I remember, like, blisters on my right, like having allergic reaction practically to being in front of others. So I always tell people, if it were possible for me, and I was so stuck on so many levels, you're gonna do fine.
How long did that process take to make that kind of a transformation? Because you were a universally adored professor at Rotman, and the energy that you bring into a lecture hall is just something that I've experienced it. People just want to be around it. You create a community in the room. You create an openness that is so special. And so to hear that that's how you started your teaching career is shocking. So
Mhm.
how long did that take?
Here's the thing. It took many years of overdoing that didn't work. So think of overdoing sort of desensitization. You're still very uncomfortable, but you still get out there.
Mhm.
But there was sort of uh, the transformation itself is actually short. It's a couple of weeks. It's almost like something clicks inside of you when you do the inner work. It's like it's a click, and when you feel the click, and suddenly you show up, and you're having a very, very different experience. So it's a fast transformation with a long tail of believing that you should just push your way through it or overdo your way through it. So one thing that I really love about techniques that I've kind of chosen and put together in the book is that just that it doesn't take long. You can transform some part of yourself within weeks. You just need to know what you're doing. And the thing, when I was doing it, I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I had the benefit of all of these different theories of psychology, but nobody put it together for me.
Mhm.
And I imagine partially unconsciously what I did in the book, I put together a book that I needed for myself.
That's beautiful. I think a lot of people may have come up to a moment like that and thought, oh, this must mean I shouldn't be a teacher, or this must mean I just shouldn't do public speaking, and immediately bounced into something that was more comfortable for the person they were at that moment. This book is about the possible self. What would you say to folks who have that tendency to want to jump to the next thing to get away from that difficult feeling?
That those places that are uncomfortable and painful have so much richness and potential for you. And although in the moment they immature, they feel embarrassing, like we want to get away from them, those are going to be the sources of your greatest growth. So don't give up a part of yourself yet. Give it a chance. Give it a bit of a chance.
Take us through the title, The Possible Self. What do you imagine for folks who read it and pick it up that they'll understand about that term?
What I was hoping it would invoke is a little bit of uncertainty because I think we are limited in understanding what our future potential is. Because as humans, every time we fulfill potential, and a whole other set of potentialities opens up for us. It's supposed to be like that. We're not supposed to know what our top of the mountain for us
Mm.
is. So, it's like being a person is like living on a magic mountain. Whenever you reach some sort of plateau or even the top, a whole new set of things opens up of the kind that you couldn't have imagined. And so what I would love is if people had positive relationship with the unimagined possible self that will just open up to them and become visible to them later on, um, and to be okay and have kind of be friends with the unknown of their future self. Um, we don't know what's possible for us. Isn't that an exciting thing to discover?
Absolutely. Um, some people may think to themselves, okay, I may not know what's possible for me. I'm going to ask someone I really trust who knows me really well, and they're going to tell me where the top of my mountain is. What would you say to folks that are listening to those signals or taking them in? How do they measure them against staying in that uncertainty of becoming their own possible self with their own compass and less with external signals?
You know, um, when you ask your loved ones about your potential, your possibility, your loved ones know your past, okay? And they they try to imagine your future based on your past. Most people you ask don't even know what top of their mountain
Mm.
is, let alone top of your mountain. Um, you can hear advice, you can listen politely to all the things they have to say, but in the end, the only person who has an intuition, a sense of where you're going to go, which directions you need to go, is going to be you. I would love if I could tell you there is a special wise person out there who you can ask and they can tell you. But unfortunately, this is one place where you really need to develop that hearing of that inner voice, your own inner voice, and looking for that inner thread. Like the reason why I call it a thread is because it's so thin and small and invisible sometimes. But when you feel it, you're gonna know that you're feeling it, and the longer you hold it, the bigger it gets in your hand. So it gets stronger. So it's okay if we keep losing it and if we keep reaching for it. Um, Once you even once hold it and it feels right, and you feel that inward sense of I'm exactly where I need to be. I'm not supposed to either be or somebody else. This is it. This is this moment. In this moment, I'm exactly where I need to be. That's the moments you're going to be looking for, and that's the thread. You'll know that you have it in your hand.
And everybody's invisible threads are different. They're in different spots at different times in your life. And is that a really important piece to understand, is just how unique everybody's personality and development story is?
Absolutely. Your potential is unimaginably different from one person to another. And I know that we try to find commonalities. Why? Because we want to feel like we're part, familiar things. We want to know, whoa, okay, where are we all going? But where you're going um, is unknown to me. It's potentially unknown to you as well, but it can be known to you if you just spend a little bit of time understanding your own sort of uniqueness and allowing it. Just saying, you know what, I am actually very different than anybody else around me, and I will dedicate myself to finding my inner thread.
Welcome to The Debrief, the meeting after the meeting. We're joined by your host, Sonia Senek, and a couple of her friends from work, Amar Kaur, and me, Elizabeth Chim.
Hello.
Hi, Sonia.
Hello.
What a treat to have Maja back on the pod.
Always so insightful. Not that it's unpleasant in any way, but it really makes you look at yourself. And that can be a little unpleasant sometimes.
The possible self.
In my very first presentation I ever did in my MBA, I did my MBA at Rotman. They recorded the entire presentation, video recorded, didn't tell us. And we had to watch the recording as a team and analyze ourselves presenting with Maja there. And it was part of this self-development journey that we went on. And I realized that I sway a lot when I present.
You were standing and swaying like a flag in the wind?
Truly. I wish people could see. But I sway a lot, and I never realized it was just a thing that I would do when talking. And I've never done it again after that.
So sports.
Okay.
One of the most critical pieces of high performance sports is watching game tape and unpacking how things went either right or wrong. Right. So looking at the system, looking at how you played, whether or not you executed well, that process is really important. But it's not really that common. We do it on a Zoom call presentation, for example, or standing in a lecture hall in front of your peers. It's very different.
Yeah, exactly. One of the best ways to improve with your speaking abilities and public speaking is to record yourself and watch it over. But it's so incredibly uncomfortable.
We've touched on this before, but folks love Maja's classes. The classes that Maja teaches at the University of Toronto are extremely popular. And students talk about how the experience is transformational. And what is so interesting about talking to her about her research is that much of what she's doing is pointing them back towards themselves. She never positions herself as having the answers. She's always positioning herself in terms of how an individual should contemplate their own experience of being them, which, as we know, everybody is completely different. And so how that's been able to resonate with so many, at this point, thousands of students that have come through her classes. And now for it to be in a book, I'm just so excited for people to benefit from the way that she delivers this content. I think it's so special.
And I loved how she shared that she was actually a really bad teacher when she first started out. And she changed that. And it's just an example of how you can keep improving. You're not just, I guess teaching's not for me. I'm not a good public speaker. I'm not a good runner. I'm not a good singer. You can learn all those things.
Yep.
I have a fact. And the fact is about birth order and how it can influence personality. But we're not sure how much.
So curious to learn more.
Okay, so apparently this idea goes back to Australian psychologist named Alfred Adler, who came up with the concept of birth order in the 1960s. He actually felt like your psychological birth order, which is how you perceived yourself to be positioned within your family, probably had a bigger effect on you than the literal order in which you became part of the family.
Okay, quick. Are you oldest, middle, or youngest children?
Oldest.
Youngest. I don't know the birth order of Waffles, but I know she was the runt of the litter.
She has something to prove to this world.
Would you also perceive yourself to be the older?
I definitely feel like I have youngest sibling vibes. And it is funny how you mentioned it is just the way that you perceive yourself. So I do think there is a lot of psychology behind what you think your roles are in any kind of dynamic. There's lots of studies that show when you're given a certain role, you'll behave a certain way. And so, yeah, I was a little bit more of a free spirit, a bit of a crybaby, a little bit spoiled, like kind of the tropes of a younger child.
Will your siblings listen to this and be like, wow, I can't believe she used her podcast?
My siblings absolutely do not listen to the podcast. They've had their fill of my insights. It's also, I'm in the mix with lots of cousins too. I think that also influenced my general experience of what's possible in life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm youngest on one side of my cousins. I am. And then
Wow.
on the other, I'm a mix in the middle somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest on one side and Mick on the other.
The oldest, that is a mantle to hold, right? That's a lot of pressure. Everyone's experiencing everything for the first time. I just want to give all the firstborn listeners all the credit they deserve
Thank you
for
so
what
much.
they carry in this world.
And you know what's the most hilarious part is that none of us have even mentioned middle siblings.
For the record, we did not forget about the middle children who also carry an enormous burden of being the middle children.